This fall was the first time I can remember that I didn't insist on leading a service reflecting on the themes of the Jewish High Holy Days. And I told myself it was because I was just back from sabbatical and the worship team already had a plan. It would be rude to ask them to switch gears midstream, but the truth is that I was scared. It didn't feel right to talk about the High Holy Days without talking about what's going on in Gaza. And I didn't want to talk about what's going on in Gaza. It feels like navigating a field full of landmines. There be dragons. Whatever I say is likely to make someone angry or worse, cause actual harm. I told myself it doesn't really matter what some random minister in a UU church in the middle of Idaho thinks about all this. It's incredibly complicated. I'm not a scholar of Middle Eastern history. I've read just enough to become convinced that it's an unholy mess, hundreds of years in the making, and there's no simple path out. Why would anyone want to hear that opinion? But the still small voice, whether it's spirit or intuition or maybe even conscience, it doesn't like it when I'm cowardly, when I'm a wimp. So when this Jewish holiday drew near, a minor holiday to be sure, but one that commemorates a military victory, the voice just told me to put my big girl pants on and do the thing. So please know, you don't have to agree with anything I'm about to say. And if you disagree with me and want to talk with me about it, my door and my heart are always open. So let's start here. Anyone with a conscience knows that what's going on in Gaza is horrific and needs to stop. That's my first step onto this field of landmines. And here's the second. What happened on October 7th was also horrific. Unprovoked attacks on civilians can't be countenanced. The attack in Australia was horrific. The fact that locally our LDS wards are dealing with threats of violence because of the whole situation with Charlie Kirk is horrific. We can't be okay with any of this. So the next thing I'll say is that no one wants to live under the thumb of a colonial power. Palestinians deserve rights and land. Their children deserve to grow up safe and free. And I can only imagine what it would be like to live in a place with 100-year-plus history of terrorist attacks. I think about what it would do to a person's nervous system, actually, to constantly feel vulnerable, like every time you leave the house, there's no one in Israel who doesn't know someone who's been injured or killed in a terrorist attack. And Israeli children deserve the chance to grow up safe and free, too. And here's what may be my most dangerous step. I think we need to start where we are. We need to work with what's in front of us. And if we want to talk about colonialism and imperialism, state-sanctioned oppression and violence, we, as in we who live here in the United States, have a way worse track record than Israel. Our track record in terms of foreign policy, war, and peace is pretty abysmal. Again, I'm not a scholar, but I've read enough to understand that we haven't been the heroes of the story in a very long time, and that's regardless of which political party happened to be in power. All of us in this room benefit, at least indirectly, from the military-industrial complex, which forms a huge, huge basis for our entire economic system. And our nation is currently, right now, enacting horrific violence against shipwrecked Venezuelans, signaling for help, against immigrants here, and even against US citizens who hold marginalized identities or are just people like us exercising their First Amendment rights. Sometimes I wonder if part of the reason we focus our attention and outrage on horrors happening far away is because it's less painful or complicated than facing into the horrors that are happening here. Here's the thing. We all want to be the good guys. And we want those people over there to be the bad guys. That's human nature. It's human nature to want simplified narratives. We love to imagine epic battles between fascists and freedom fighters, the empire and the rebellion, Republicans and Democrats, Christian nationalists and the educated elite. But the reality is way more complicated and so much messier than the stories we like to tell ourselves. Never mind the stories that we're fed by the media. So, back to Hanukkah. The word means rededication or reconsecration. What if we take the next 8 days as an invitation to reflect on how we maintain integrity in the midst of all the messiness? What if we take this holiday as an opportunity to look for new narratives that might sustain us, that might help create little pockets of peace and connection? What if we use this time to ask ourselves if and how we can make miracles in times when hope is hard to find? What if we choose to spend these 8 days reflecting on what we can do to turn a battlefield or a minefield into a sanctuary? Now, I think we need to begin by getting off of our high horse. We need to cede the moral high ground, and that's C-E-D-E, not C-E-E-D. S-E-E-D. S-E-E-D. Oh, it never hurts to drop some seeds. If you come right down to that. So many of our relationships have that one up, one down dynamic. We're more likely to debate than relate. We aren't trying to seek to know each other. If we enter into a conversation with the intention of changing someone's mind, we're dooming ourselves to failure before we even start. If we're willing to get down off that high horse, then connection becomes the primary goal of our interaction. You know, it's actually kind of ironic. I think if we want to have a shot at changing someone's mind about a particular issue that we care about, we have to stop trying to change their mind and choose instead to really listen and relate and engage. Relate, not debate. So how do we do that? We begin by leading with curiosity. The Buddhists call it beginner's mind. We start from a place of not knowing. We can let ourselves be fascinated by the other person's mind, their history, their experiences, their way of thinking, and not in a condescending manner like, wow, how could you actually believe that? But with a genuine and, dare I say, reverent approach. If we're willing to see the person we're with as a wise and thoughtful teacher, then we will become grateful if they're willing to open up and share why they think what they think, why they choose to do what they're doing. Which is not to say we shouldn't be strategic about our timing and our approach. Sitting down in the middle of a battlefield and trying to create a little altar while the bullets are still flying is not going to have the result we're looking for. Or, to be less metaphorical, if, say, we're having a holiday dinner with family members who hold different religious or political beliefs, we might try to survive it by not talking about anything. Everyone walks on eggshells, but then someone's going to drink too much, or someone else is going to say something outrageous, and all of a sudden it's an all-out war. And once that happens, once people are dysregulated, any hope at a creative and productive connection goes out the window. But we can't just avoid touchy subjects either. So here's a scenario. Imagine people are still in a good mood, still sober, and you try asking, say, I understand ICE came to your town, and there were also a bunch of people protesting. Did you see anything? Can you tell us about what happened? And then listen. Did anyone attend the Braver Angels workshop that Kathy Dawes led yesterday? Yeah. I hope we'll see more of those. It's a great organization that helps people develop the skills they need to navigate the partisan divide without falling into the chasm. From my perspective, the key is that we need to be able to genuinely express affection, appreciation, and love for the person we're trying to connect with. Because we know, right? We know if someone's faking it. Someone's pretending to be kind to us just so that they can convince us of their point of view. If we want to create a sanctuary, people have to feel safe with us. In a sanctuary, everyone's able to be themselves. We're not going to be judged or manipulated. No one's going to try to control us or persuade us. Once the connection's established, once people are feeling safe and understood, the next thing we need to do is look for common ground. If we've listened well enough, we understand the deep values driving that other person's perspectives. And the odds are we can find something in there, some value that we share. And if we haven't found common ground, then we need to keep asking questions until we do. When we find that common ground, we're able to shift, and rather than seeing each other as good guys and bad guys, we understand that we're on the same team. We're all just humans. Everyone wants to find a way through a messy and complicated world. We're in this together. So, I hear that you care about fairness. I do too. Now then, sometimes common ground is the hard stuff. It sounds like you're scared and uncertain. Me too. We need to be vulnerable in order to create the kinds of relationships that invite transformation and growth. Now, I need to add a caveat here because it's not always safe to be vulnerable. If one side brings down the walls and the other is still in a battle mindset, someone's going to get trampled. It takes two to tango, and boundaries are essential, particularly for people with marginalized identities. Trust is earned, and it's our job to actually keep ourselves safe until trust is established. However, we also need to hold the truth that all growth, change, and shift in mindset happens in that context of loving and compassionate and vulnerable relationship. When the battlefield becomes a sanctuary, people with different experiences on opposite sides are able to bring down the armor around their hearts. We take risks, we tell the truth, and because human beings are naturally empathetic when confronted with another person's raw humanity, their pain and their suffering, we care. It's hardwired in us. And in that moment of compassionate connection, the shift in opinion or behavior comes. Now, I'm not just making all of this up out of my own head. Are any of you familiar with the Compassionate Listening Project? Okay, I see one person nodding. When I think about the path to peace in the Middle of the East, I think first and foremost about their work. Could we watch the little video?
Our world has never been more polarized and full of conflict. So many of us watch the news and feel helpless, wondering, how can we make a difference? For 33 years, the Compassionate Listening Project has been developing and teaching powerful peacemaking skills that everyone can learn. Compassionate listening heals polarization, transforms conflict, and creates cultures of peace, starting with each one of us. Our work began in 1990 with our founder, Leah Green, taking hundreds of people to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza to listen to people on all sides of the conflict and bring Israelis and Palestinians together for trainings. After 9 years, we took compassionate listening out to the world. We've now taught in over 30 countries. Compassionate listening shows us that our hearts are our most powerful force for transforming conflict and building peace in our families, communities, and anywhere there's division and dehumanization.
It's a really beautiful, hopeful organization, and I've attended one of their trainings. They essentially go to war-torn places and create sacred space. They do exactly what we're talking about. They take the battlefield and turn it into a sanctuary. And in that sacred space, connections are made and healing happens. And the folks on opposite side are able to come together and create a path that might actually lead to peace in the Middle East or anywhere they happen to be. But it is slow work. The kind of change we're talking about happens one heart, one story at a time, which is why most of us need to start where we are, making peace with the people in front of us. Here's a story about a time I turned the battlefield of a bridge table into a sanctuary and made a beautiful connection with a man who I know had very different political and religious beliefs than I do because he wrote columns for the Daily News on a regular basis. It's on my mind because I just read his obituary this week. So this was back a few years ago, and we were playing bridge, and I knew he was conservative. And then at one point over the cards and the tea and the cookies, he brought up his military service. He shared how much he valued it. He proudly asserted that he had encouraged all of his sons to enlist. I thanked him for his service and shared that many of the members of my family had also served, most recently my little brother, and that for most of them it had also been mostly a good experience. And I could have left it there, but something tugged on me and I started talking about recent changes in the military, multiple deployments, lack of support for veterans and their families, the high rates of mental illness, domestic violence, and suicide. I shared that I felt as if our politicians didn't factor those lives into the real cost of war. I shared my broken heart, and then I said, and that's why I'm a pacifist. I was so nervous, I couldn't even make eye contact. I was just staring at my cards. I fully expected for him to show me the door, for him to start yelling. But when I finished speaking and finally looked up, he was crying. There were tears running down his face, and he said, I was absolutely right. He said, thank you for caring. He said, it used to be about protecting our nation and standing up for what's right. These days, too often we go to war and it's just about money. Violence should always be the last resort, and we need to take care of our veterans when they come home. It was a powerful and profound moment. And those kinds of moments, that's what we're looking for. That's what we build the foundation for peace upon. So here is your Hanukkah challenge, should you choose to accept it. For each of the next 8 days, do these two things. Look for ways to complicate the narrative. Learn something new, research a different perspective. Talk to someone who you know holds a different perspective and try to forge or deepen an authentic connection. Relate instead of debating. And throughout these 8 days, make it a practice when you meet a fellow human out in the wild to greet them as a beloved friend, even if you've never met them before. In each encounter, say, I see you. You are holy. And this place, this world, this life with all of its messiness and heartbreak is also holy. Even when things are complicated and painful, still holy. Even if we disagree, even if you're on the other team, still, to me, you are wise and worthy of care and respect. Now, we don't have to do this with words necessarily. It would be a little weird to go up to people in the grocery store and just spout forth. But this is a great thing about being human, right? We can convey all of that with eye contact, with a smile, with a gentle and compassionate touch on the arm. Love is the center of our faith here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Palouse. So our job, whether it's Hanukkah or just a Tuesday, is to let that light of love shine through whenever, however, and wherever we can. So, beloveds, be brave and become the sanctuaries in the midst of the mess. So be it, and so may it be.